Everyone has trauma. Trauma is considered to be the baggage we carry around with us that is unresolved, the emotional responses to stressful situations that we've not yet dealt with. And for comic book superheroes and supervillains, we'll find no lack of trauma lurking beneath the surface. For them, their trauma is pretty much what has shaped them into who they are today. The emotional scars that they have earned is what pushed them to become a hero or a criminal mastermind. I guess that is a super's way of working through their problems, instead of facing them in a personal, more direct manner. Instead, they use their trauma to inspire them to help or to harm others. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. Today we're going to be looking at some of the most scathing traumatic experiences that have transformed some of our favorite characters into either good or bad folks as we count down the top 10 dark origin stories that really happened. And if you love the darkest of dark versions of characters and stories within comics, be sure to check out our Dark Alternate Versions playlist by clicking on over here. As always, I will also have some bonus content coming your way at the end of this video, so stay tuned. But first, let's get counting. Number 10. Swarm. If you have a fear of bees, or more specifically mutated killer bees, then you might find the story of Fritz von Meyer to be terrifying. Meyer became a sometime Spider-Man villain after his transformation into basically a horde of killer bees. He was a scientist in the employ of the German Axis forces during World War II. Not much is known of his backstory previous to that, but with unlimited funding, he set out to study poisons, toxins, and bees. Finding an apparently mutated hive of bees, he attempted to awaken their killer instincts and seize control of them. But his plan backfired and they ended up gaining back their killer instincts and using them to swarm and kill Meyer. Meyer's consciousness, however, became absorbed into the bees as his physical form died, and as such, he is now a man who is made up entirely of bees. If that isn't something out of a nightmare, I really don't know what is. Number 9. Swamp Thing. Alec Holland is believed by Swamp Thing himself to be the man that the creature once was. Alec Holland and his wife were living out in the swamp and were both scientists who had developed a bio-restorative formula that would solve world hunger. However, goons were sent to sabotage and destroy the discovery during this original origin story. The goons put explosives in the lab and Alec woke up following the explosion covered in the bio-restorative formula. He ran out into the swamp but found himself merged with it, becoming an avatar of the green, merging with that swamp and becoming the monstrous creature known as Swamp Thing. Originally in the comics, Swamp Thing, believing it had once been Alec, was always trying to find a way to return to a more human state, longing to be mortal once more. Number 8. John Constantine. We recently got an interesting look into John Constantine's origins in the new DC Black Label limited series Rise and Fall. Hellblazer Rise and Fall. That's the whole long title. This is a story divided up and told over the course of 3 books. In the first book, we are told of Constantine's backstory and everything that has shaped him into the lovable troublemaker of an occult detective that he has become today. His life started in the dark from the moment he was born. His mother passed away, bringing him into the world, which set the stage for what his life would then be like. His father turned to drink and treated young John harshly, never once sympathizing with his son, which only motivated John to become more of a young vagabond, staying out and running around the streets of London late at night. We also learn of the tragic loss of one of his childhood friends in the book. Truly, it's a must-read for Constantine fans, or just for fans of good comics. Number 7. Batman. The death of Batman's parents and the trauma he suffered from witnessing that as a young boy would forever change Bruce. It would turn him into the vigilante he is today and inspire him to set out on a mission to become the Dark Knight, dedicating his life to an intense training regimen and traveling the world to learn from a variety of masters on a variety of subjects, from detective work to martial arts to magic. To this day, it's still the death of Bruce Wayne's parents that remains one of the most tragic events in his life, still haunting him to the point that he's even seen hallucinating about his parents' death while tripping on Joker venom during the current events of Joker War. Always tends to be the thing he comes back to. That and currently the loss of Alfred. Number 6. SENTRY. Robert Reynolds was a drug addict who snuck into a lab and discovered the experimental golden SENTRY serum, though the backstory he'd be given in the comics within the Marvel Universe later on would be much less dark. Consuming the serum granted, Reynolds gained the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns, making him one of the most powerful superheroes ever known. Although the Sentry was a hero who was known for his Superman-like extreme level of goodness, he had a dark secret, one that was unknown even to him for a very long time. Bob Reynolds suffered from a split personality disorder, in part brought on by the villain Mastermind's manipulations, which meant that he was not only capable of immense good, but immense evil as well, as his personality split into that of the superheroic Sentry and the powerful supervillain known as the Void. When it was revealed that Bob himself was also the greatest villain on the planet, he recruited the help of his superhero friends such as Doctor Strange and Mr. Fantastic to help everyone, including Bob, forget about the Sentry, so that the Void would also never return, making Bob, for a time, the greatest hero that the world forgot. Number 5. Rorschach. Walter Kovacs was raised by a mother who mistreated him, basically resenting his very existence. This mistreatment inspired Walter to stand up to those who would hurt others. These beliefs led to Walter himself to brutally confront his own schoolyard bullies, even going so far as to blind one of them as a child. Walter became a sociopath because of how he was treated when he was younger, believing in a strict moral code and using that as his own vigilante compass to decide who should be punished and how severely. His mother was a prostitute, and when he learned of her death at the hands of her pimp, who force-fed her Drano to kill her, he only responded with one word: good. Ooh, dark. Number 4. Jessica Jones. In the Netflix Jessica Jones series, we learned that Jessica Jones became a detective and hero in essence because of the fact that she was assaulted and mind-controlled by Purple Man, who made her to do all sorts of things that she didn't want to do. In the Alias series, Jessica Jones attempts to confront her trauma, wrestling with just how much control Kilgrave actually had over her, and if it's possible that part of her motivation for all of the things he had her do could have actually come somehow from within herself. This is a common thing with victims of this type of assault, wondering about how much responsibility or control you actually had in that situation, and in a sense blaming yourself for what happened to you. But beyond this, Jessica Jones's original origins, how she got her powers, actually involved a massive vehicular collision, where her entire family was killed except for her. And it's implied that she only survived because she was exposed to radioactive materials, whose containers were damaged in the accident, leaking out and interacting with Jessica. Jessica's original last name had been Campbell, and she didn't get her name Jones until she was later adopted by Alyssa Jones and her husband, after Jessica's family's death. Ugh. Actually, Jessica seems to be a bit of a cursed name in the Marvel Universe. There's a lot of Jessicas with dark origins. Number 3. Magneto. Well known for a long time in the comics by his alias Eric Magnus Lenscher, Magneto's original name and origins revealed that he grew up as a young Jewish boy during World War II named Max Eisenhardt. His family left Germany when things started to get bad, retreating to Warsaw where they lived in the Warsaw Ghetto. Eventually, Max was taken to the extermination camp at Auschwitz after he and his family attempted to leave the Warsaw Ghetto. Following his time at Auschwitz, Max shed his original name and adopted another so that he might better fit in with his wife Magda's Romani people. When it comes to Magneto's backstory, he is no stranger to discrimination, and it is his suffering and the suffering of others that he has witnessed that has inspired him to become the villain and the sometimes hero that we know today. Number 2. Red Hood. When it comes to Jason Todd's transformation from Robin to Red Hood, there was a ton of dark events that came into play here, which caused Jason Todd to go from hero to villain, and then of course to anti-hero. Todd was seemingly one of the permanent deaths in comics after he was beaten to near death by the Joker, following being sold out by his own birth mother, who he then even still fought to free before being killed in an explosion. We thought we'd never see him return, but he was later brought back using the Lazarus Pit, and then was trained by Dukra of the All Cast and joined the League of Assassins for a time. When he finally returned to Gotham, it was originally as the villain Red Hood, seeking brutal justice, and later on, as Joker would say in 3 Jokers Book 1, becoming one of his own villainous creations. Ooh, so dark. When you realize you've become a thing you didn't want to be and someone evil made you that. Eee. Number 1. Wolverine. Wolverine has more trauma in his life than all the X-Men put together. Actually, he's probably got more trauma in one pinky than all of the X-Men. The only thing that protects Wolverine from the darkness of his own multi-chapter tragic origins is the fact that his brain actually also uses his healing factor to basically rid him of undesirable or painful memories. Young James Howlett's powers first manifested when his birth father killed his foster father, the husband of his mother. In a rage, James used his bone claws to kill his birth father, Thomas Logan, and his mother, still recovering from the loss of her firstborn son, severely traumatized, then took her own life. There are a lot of things that came after that when it comes to Wolverine's story and his past, pretty much all of them being wrapped up in some kind of traumatic experience. Thank you so much for watching, Nerd Squad. What do you think are some of the darkest origins around when it comes to comic book characters? Who do you think has the darkest origin story for comics outside of the big two? To me, Spawn will always have one of the darkest origins of all time. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And speaking of comments, it's time to turn to some comments from one of our latest videos, Top 10 Best Marvel Comics of the 2010s. 6 CMH3 comments, no Jason Aaron Thor stories? Damn, that's cold. I know, I feel like I robbed Jason Aaron a bit of his place on this list in general. Honestly, there were just too many good comics for me to pick just 10. I could have easily done a top 20. Maybe we'll see a part 2. There were so many comic series I wanted to include, but I just couldn't fit them on the list, and I did my best to make it well balanced in terms of not all of them being from later in the decade, and tried to include some comics that fans may have missed out on during their release, but that I believe deserve to be read by everybody, because they're just so good. TL writes, I love this concept. Can you please keep this going? Hopefully it becomes a series. I would love that. I'd love to even do a top 10 comic series within even single years. Like in 2019 alone, there was so much good stuff that came out across the board from all kinds of publishers. My suggestion is to just share, watch, and like content that you want more of. If you love something, we are happy to give you more of that content. UPsych13 asks, Captain Marvel has fans? Just remind me, how many times did they reboot it? Well, as a Captain Marvel and Carol Danvers fan, I'd be happy to educate you a bit on that. We are on volume 10 of Captain Marvel, but Carol Danvers didn't take over the mantle until volume 7, so her series only has been rebooted 4 times. Before that, it was Marvel, Monica Rambeau, and Janice Vell who wore the mantle. Also, just as an FYI, we're on volume 7 of Wolverine and volume 9 of Captain America. Little history for you. And that's all the time we have for comments today. Be sure to comment below for a chance to have your thoughts and feels acknowledged in a future video. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight, reminding you to stay nerdy, YouTube. Figured since we're talking dark and we're talking some Batman stuff, may as well wear my jacket. Also, I'm cold, so yeah. So excited to talk about dark origins. Originally in the comics. I was gonna say something else, but I didn't script it, so I'm just gonna leave it out. Number 5. Scrolled up really far there, Chris. We'll just skip through Rorschach. Young James Howlett's powers first manifested after his. When his? Just read it, Amanda.